All right, there we go. Good evening, everybody. First and foremost, I wanted to start this presentation with an apology. We had a faculty advisory committee meeting that went over. There was a lot of questions, rightfully so. It is budget season, and I had to speed down here, so please don't tell the sheriff's office how fast I was going down 81. I wanted to get here on time, but thank you all so much. I value everybody's time, and I want to make sure that I'm able to answer and get to all of your questions. At a previous round of town halls, we received some feedback to live stream and see how it goes for families and constituents that aren't able to make it, because one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and I've shared it in many different venues, is engaging with the community, engaging with parents, stakeholders, our staff, to answer any questions that you all have and to gather feedback from you so that we can continue to move forward to meet our goals and our vision as a school division, as well as meeting the needs of all of our students. So I'm going to go through this presentation and provide you all with where we currently are with the budget process. And if you've never sat through one of my presentations, this is engaging. It isn't just, I'm going to wait till the end and say, ask questions. I'm going to take intentional hesitations throughout, and I want your feedback. That is the intention of this. The intention is to get feedback and information from you. So if it's from a staff member, if it's from a parent, or just a constituent, if you're here just because you're curious, please, want your feedback. Before I go any further, though, we do have one of our school board members, Darryl Bell. You can go ahead and wave there. I always like to introduce whenever we have a school board member or board of supervisors. So thank you, sir, for being here. It means a lot. And I'm sure he will chime in as well. So thank you very much. So to kind of go through the agenda of this presentation, we're going to talk about what is a needs-based budget. What does that mean? And what goes into that needs-based budget, and what are the different funds that we look at every year? And I want to focus on what that funding streams look like for a school division, specifically Frederick County. And then we're going to talk about timelines and next steps. So the budget process is very extensive. This is not something that is put together in a silo. It's not something that I just gather a bunch of imaginary information and say, you know what, I think this is something that we need. We start with our staff, our principals, our central office staff, and we work on what are the needs of our school division based on where we currently are meeting the needs of our students. So we gather feedback and information. We work with our school board. Every year in October, November, we put together what's called budget priorities. And our school board has to vote on those priorities, and those guide our next steps, which we're going to dive into here what those are in a second. Then after we gather all of that information, we put it all together, and we take a look at the dollars that we are receiving from the state. We take a look at the dollars that we're projected to get from the locality, and we determine and prioritize what items we need to move forward with and propose to our school board, who adopts, and then our locality will then approve the dollar figure that we are asking for and requesting. We are limited by the dollars we receive from the state and the dollars that we receive from the locality. And one of the things that we are trying to be more transparent about is we understand that there potentially is an additional burden on the taxpayer. We understand that. But we also want to make sure that we are articulating in a clear manner that there is a return on investment into our students because they are 100% of our future. And that is why I like to engage in these forums, engage in other constituents in our community to remind others about why it's important to invest in our school system and answer those challenging questions. And we get a lot of them. I don't have students in the school system. Why do I have to give money to the schools? Why do I have to pay taxes to pay for salaries for teachers and building new schools? And we appreciate those questions because they're important. I'm a taxpayer just like other Frederick County residents as well. So we have to talk through what that looks like, what that means, and be able to answer any questions that come along with that. Because, again, we put all of this together. We cannot lose focus. We put it all together for our students. What are we doing what's best for our students so that we can help build our future and build the next steps of our society and continue to provide for them and help create pathways for them to be successful? So here's just a little bit of a breakdown of a timeline, and I'm going to kind of dive into this now, but I'm going to go into more specific detail later. So we start on the budget process in August. So right when this is done in April, we have a little bit of a reprieve. Of course, there's other things that we do, and then we'll start right back up with budget conversations in August. So it is a 9-month process. It is very, very extensive. And then we present the board to our school board as a needs-based budget, as I mentioned to you, in regards to the needs of our school division. We have finance committee meetings. We have budget work sessions. We work through the different components of the budget, answer any questions. We work with our board of supervisors, which is something new that we started this year, which is going very, very well. And then what we do is we represent the budget to the board in regards to what some adjustments and changes they would like to see, and then they adopt it as their own. So it starts as the superintendent's needs-based budget, and then the school board adopts that budget as their own. It goes across the street to our board of supervisors, and they have conversations and discussions before it gets approved in April. Any questions about that? Okay. As I mentioned to you a second ago, we have school board budget priorities that are reestablished every year. And sometimes there's some changes, and sometimes they stay the same, but regardless, they have to be approved every year. So the 3 budget priorities that we had this year were to focus on 3 main areas. First was instructional initiatives. Second was compensation packages. And then third is looking at our current assets. Looking at our buildings, our HVAC, our lighting systems, our school buses, things that we own that we have to take care of. Looking at those current assets. And some additional things that we included in here is starting to embrace not just thinking about this year. Focusing on phasing in, looking 5 years down the road, looking 10 years down the road, so that we can get ahead of these items so that we're not in the same boat where we are now, where we are behind and we are having a hard time catching up in regards to compensation packages as well as the space issues that we've been talking about for many, many years now. So we want to do a better job being good stewards of our dollar, but also of thinking ahead in regards to how we're going to meet the needs of our students. And as I mentioned, please, I'm going to take intentional pauses, but just raise your hand, speak out, because I want to be able to answer any questions or if you have any feedback, please. We also have something called Inspire 2025. You might have seen that being mentioned. You might see it on our website. You might see it up in our schools. And that's our strategic plan. And the majority of school divisions have what's called a strategic plan. And again, that guides a school division in regards to different goals, initiatives, to make sure that we stay on track. Think of like banks on a river, per se. And each of these areas are areas that we continue to monitor, we measure, and we want to see how we are progressing or how we're not progressing. And then this also drives how we develop our budget every year. So we take a look at student success, culture, strategic partnerships, and high-quality staff. And those are items also that guide our budget process. That is coming up to an end in the end of year 25, so we are going to be redeveloping our strategic plan, which typically is 5 years, some are 10. 5 years is a little bit more realistic because you're able to make some adjustments and changes as necessary instead of waiting 10 years. So we will be engaging with the public and the community about redeveloping Inspire 2030, or whatever we choose to decide to call it. So before I go any further with the budget, I want to focus on some of the great things that are happening here in Frederick County. And I say some because we would probably need a whole evening to talk about all of the 14,000 plus great things happening in our school division. Because we have a lot of great students here in Frederick County. They're accomplishing a lot of great things, and we want to focus on each of those aspects and continue with those great things that are happening. And as you can see, we have over 21 schools, over 14,000 students. We have numerous programs on both ends of the spectrum, from students with disabilities to gifted students, and we provide a plethora of opportunities and pathways for students, and we are looking to grow and expand that. But with all those great things, I want to draw your attention down there to the bottom, because some people need to understand that we do more than just educating students. As you can see, we feed over 1.5 million lunches. That's every year. No other food service provides that many lunches in a locality, in a community. We also travel 2.4 million miles every year, providing transportation for students to and from school, as well as other aspects of extracurricular activities. So there is a lot of work that goes into that, and there's a lot of assets that we need to take care of, because in order to serve those lunches and drive those buses, we need to make sure that we are taking care of our people. We also have a lot of new programs that we're taking a look at. We also have a lot of recognitions and acknowledgments. And one of the things that we started new this past year was what's called a Transition Day, to provide students who are transitioning into a new school, kindergarten, rising 6th, and rising 9th, the opportunity to become acclimated to the school without having all these other students in the building. And it was actually a very good success. There were some things that we need to tweak and work on, but it was very successful for not only our students, but for our parents, because going to kindergarten for the first time or going to a middle school or high school can be very intimidating. So we want to make sure that we're able to provide the supports and the necessary opportunities for our students so we can set them up for success. And we're looking into adding more and more of those components so that we can do things differently to make sure that we're providing all of our students with the appropriate pathways and opportunities they deserve. Take intentional pauses. Questions? Okay. However, we have a lot of great things going on in Frederick County. We also want to acknowledge that we have work to do. There is some areas that we need to improve, and we want to acknowledge those areas. And we take a look at 3 pretty basic areas. However, these aren't the only ways that we measure growth and we measure the ultimate success of our students, but these are the 3 basic areas that we typically focus on. First is SOL scores, and these are our 30-mile radius comparison school divisions within this area, and I put the ranking next to us right there in line 3, and this was 2021, as you can see where we fared. Here's 21-22, and these are overall scores, and here's 22-23. And as you can see, we are going down. So we have work to do. However, I want to make sure that we understand that, yes, we are going down, but there are some areas that we are going up. This is overall scores. But we have some work to do, because we should not be going down overall. We should be improving and going up. So we need to be able to invest in those improvements, invest in providing those supports and resources for our teachers and our students, and that is something that we will be continuously focused on and working on so that we can continue to see the improvements that we need to see. Yes, sir. So there are a multitude of causes, but 3 main ones that we're really focusing on. The first is learning loss because of COVID. I mean, that is definitely something that is still around, the residuals of that in regards to students not coming to school consistently, as well as other variables that were impacted there. Secondly is chronic absenteeism, and I'm going to get to, actually, if I can jump right to this slide right here. As you can see, we are first, so I don't want to brag about that too much because that 15% is still pretty high, but that's something we need to work on, and we have some strategies there, so that chronic absenteeism definitely doesn't help. And then thirdly, I think we need to do a better job of taking a look at what resources and supports we're providing our teachers. And what do those professional development opportunities look like? And how are we evolving those supports for our students? Because our students have unique needs, and we want to make sure that we're evolving those strategies to meet the needs of those students. So we have to invest in that, and we have to make those decisions. Now, are there other variables? I'm sure, and I'm sure our principals can share what those variables are. We're working very hard to improve these scores, but those are going to be some of those areas as to why that's the way that is. Yes, sir, and then we'll come over here.
I just wondered if there were any active studies going on with cell phones in class, not purposely used for classroom purposes, not enforced.
So there is some research out there that cell phone use does add to distractibility, does add to, for even adults to be able to focus. So that is something that we are taking a deeper dive and look at. We currently have a policy on cell phones. It's probably a little loose, and we probably need to make some adjustments to it, and enforcement probably as well, if that's what you're alluding to. So again, we have some work to do there, which I think you guys are kind of setting us up for the next one. I did not see you, Livy. I'll get to you here in a second. But behaviors is also another area. So going back to what I said for the third reason of providing resources and supports for our teachers, there's a lot of new behaviors that our students are exhibiting that our teachers just haven't been exposed to before. We're seeing a lot of mental health needs. We're seeing a lot of students with disabilities that are exhibiting some behaviors that we need to be able to support, and we need to be able to provide those opportunities so that they can access their education. So we need to think differently about that. So we want to make sure that we're able to provide those resources. But again, we have to invest in that. And that's something that we definitely have to take a look at and change. But as you can see, I broke this down by 3 levels: elementary, middle, and high. And these are our referrals. And as you can see, our referrals are increasing as well. And I think this goes to show that we are dealing with some different behaviors in our classrooms and in our schools. So we need to focus on that. We'll go with Livy, and then we'll go with you, sir. Go ahead. Mhm. Great question. So a couple layers to that answer. The first layer is we are trying to provide our teachers with more opportunities to access professional learning and to be prepared to teach in the classroom. And if you ask our teachers, they want more time, from new teachers to veteran teachers. So what does that look like? So for example, for our new teachers, we added on additional days in the beginning of the school year so that they can get prepared for the start of the school year. So before it was only 1 day, we added 2 days last year, now it's a week. And new teachers come in before every other teacher comes back to get acclimated to the school, to their classroom. There is some professional learning that they get, and then we provide that. So that's the first layer there, as well as adding some additional days for teachers and really breaking down what planning looks like for those staff. So that's the first layer in providing that. Secondly, we are diving deeper into why we're losing teachers. What is the ultimate reason as to why teachers are leaving to go to other school divisions? And something that we saw more during COVID than we're seeing now, it's getting better, but it's still a problem of just leaving the profession entirely, of going to just doing something completely different. So we are tracking that. We do have a survey that staff will fill out. There is an opportunity to do an interview. We want to do better with getting ahead of that, though, of doing like a pre-exit survey and having conversations of, all right, why are you thinking of leaving? You know, not like a retaliatory conversation, but help us get better, help us improve, help us work through those pieces. In regards to the learning loss piece, you know, we are tracking how our students are performing and how they're engaging. We are receiving additional dollars to provide tutoring and other aspects of remediation. So I don't know if there's going to be a direct link there, unless they just said, hey, this is just too much, if they provided a specific reason, but that hasn't been the specific reason. It's typically the top 3 reasons, which is not enough pay, going to another profession. Number 2 is not getting along with my direct supervisor or administrator. Or 3, looking for a growth opportunity. So those are typically the ones that we see. There's other reasons in there, but those are the main ones that we typically see. Great question. Yes, sir. Yes. So 15% of our students missed more than 10% of the school year. So chronic absenteeism is a specific percentage. Yes. And the one piece with chronic absenteeism, which we have a slight issue with because we get dinged for this, is say if you had a student who went to Disneyland or went to see their family in a foreign country or what have you, and they missed more than 10 days in a given school year, they're counted towards chronic absenteeism. Even though it was excused, it still gets counted against us. Now, there is something new that the state is allowing us to do, where if there is a legitimate reason of why they left, it was excused, and they're able to access the curriculum and master, they're able to actually take some of those days away. And that's something we've worked through with a formula that the state has given us, and that's something new that just happened this year. And Dr. Angela, I see you over there, so please chime in. I know we're talking a lot about the instructional piece right now. I do have some of my team members spread throughout, so please chime in if you need to. Thank you, sir. Great questions and feedback, anybody? Anybody else? Okay. Let's dive into the specific funds that we oversee. We are a third of $1 billion organization. We oversee a third of $1 billion. And there's a lot of different funds that we oversee, which is the day-to-day operations, nutrition, transportation, textbooks. There's a multitude of funds that we oversee, and we review that every year because we receive those dollars every year from the state and the locality, so our budget is adjusted every year. So one of the things that I promised to do was to make sure that we were being good stewards of our dollar. So I challenged my staff to go back through all of our line items to determine where could there be some potential savings. Are there any lines where we didn't spend the dollars there like we thought we would, or was there a line item that we haven't spent any money there and it just carried over every year? And we were able to find $485,000, and that's $485,000 less that we will be requesting from the Board of Supervisors. And we will continue to do this and continue to be good stewards of our dollar so that we are utilizing our funds in an effective manner and we're reallocating them to, again, continue to provide our division and our students with what they need. And there's some other examples of this that I will show you in this presentation. Yes, sir.
So that is, in a sense, money unspent.
Correct.
That will not be requested, like certain organizations try and use up all the money so they can.
Correct. Correct. Now, at the end of every year, we have to be 0 or more in regards to our budget. So if we planned for $100 million, and at the end of the year we had $1 left, we're in good shape. At the end of the year, though, if we are negative, Mrs. Camry and I will be having this conversation from the jail cell. Okay? That is no exaggeration, because we have overspent taxpayer dollars. So every year, our finance office, the typical sweet spot, and Ms. Camry, correct me if I'm wrong, is typically $1,800,000 to $1 million. So at the end of every year, we will have an overage of dollars that we then request from the Board of Supervisors to say, hey, we would like to spend this money on A, B, or C. This year we purchased, I think we purchased buses, correct? Special needs buses? Fire alarms, right. Correct. As I mentioned, we're a third of $1 billion. So let's go here and then here. Oh, thank you. Yes. Okay, yes. I could do that. We'll go right back here and then here. Yes. Yeah, so the question is, if we have money at the end of the year, what we do with that money, and that is correct. So what will happen is, at the end of the year, say if we had $1 million left over, that $1 million essentially was allocated for our school division, but it's money that we had left over. So then what we do is we put together a needs-based request. We ask our school board to say, hey, we want to take that $1 million and we want to replace the auditorium at Sharando because it's fallen apart. They ask us why, what else did you consider, all the great questions they should be asking, and then Ms. Camry and I go to the Board of Supervisors and we request to spend that $1 million on the Sharando auditorium. The majority of the time, the Board of Supervisors will say, yes, you can spend that $1 million, but in some instances, and they have the authority to say, no, we're going to take that money back and we're going to start fresh next year for the next budget. And that's standard, okay? Now, on the other end of this coin, at the end of the year, if we had $4 million left over, $5 million left over, we are not being good good stewards of our dollar, and we're also not budgeting correctly. So that's very rare for that to happen. We project how much money we're going to spend. We project what the needs of the school division are, and good finance departments and good finance officers like the one that we have make sure that we're right within that sweet spot. Okay, yes, sir. How accurately do we project the budget for the year? As I just mentioned, we're typically within that $800,000 to $1 million. So it's pretty accurate. Yes, ma'am. So we are. I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry, let me explain. So the question is, so with the reallocated funds, how come we wouldn't just use them for the things we need? And let me re-explain, I apologize if I didn't explain it correctly. So every year, and I'm going to get to this, it's called cost to continue. That's where we start. So we'll start with how much we spent last year with our budget, because 82% of our budget, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but it's okay, 82% of our budget is staff. And then the other percentage is the cost to continue, because we're not decreasing in population, we're actually increasing, so that's where we start, okay? We take a look at all of the items that are currently in that cost to continue. So we just go through all of our line items, not staffing, because staffing is a different process. We take a look at all of our items, and we identify, okay, we thought I'm making this up, so please. We were going to go on this field trip, but we didn't go on this field trip for 2 years. That's $1,000. Let's take that and put that to the side. All right, we were going to buy these books for $5,000. We didn't buy those books because we didn't need them. Take that $5,000, we put it to the side. So we went through all of our line items, and we found $485,000. So with the request, which I'll get to in a second, we're requesting from the locality $7 million, okay? If we didn't do this, we would be requesting $7.5 million. Does that make sense? So we're taking this 485 and we're doing what you just asked. We are moving it to other things that we needed in our request so that we're not requesting it from the locality, thus not requesting any additional dollars from the taxpayer. Yes, got it? The only time that it could potentially be taken back is at the end of the year if we have overage of dollars and the Board of Supervisors says, nope, we want to take that money back, which very rarely happens, but it potentially could. Okay, great question. Thank you for that. Anything else? Great questions, everybody. Great feedback. And thank you, Tara, for that. How's everybody doing online? Anything else coming up? Okay. As I've mentioned to you, our greatest asset is our people. We have 2,500 staff. Without our staff, we don't get students to school, we don't feed students, we don't teach students, we don't have staff to supervise and oversee our staff in our schools and our school division. So we need to take care of our people. And as I mentioned to you, over 80% of our operating budget is staff. So this is just a summary, I'm going to break all these down here in a second. So a summary is 6.6% increase for teachers, 6.6% increase for classified staff, 5% for other professionals such as therapists, psychologists, and such, and then 3.2% for administrators. One of the aspects of this is I've been emphasizing none of these people are more important than the other. Every single person that you see on this screen is just as important. Everybody is an integral part of our school division, but when we took a look at all these positions, we looked at shortage areas, we looked at hard-to-fill positions, which I'll break down here in a second, and as the gentleman over here asked about what are the areas that we're seeing why either staff are leaving or the concerns with our SOL scores, is we need to invest in making these changes, and we need to invest in creating the pathways and opportunities for our students. So first is taking a look at our teachers. So for all of our staff, we started at a 3.2, and I promise we didn't make that number up. We got that number from the Social Security Administration for what's called a COLA, which is the cost of living adjustment. That number changes and goes up and down every year, but for this year it was a 3.2. So we started that number percentage across the board. We have an issue with our pay scales. Our pay scales are clustered in certain years of experience, which impacts pay increases for those staff. Now, they do get somewhat of an increase, but not as much if those scales were adjusted. Meaning, for a teacher who is year, say, 5 to 10, it doesn't matter if you're year 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10, you receive the minimal amount of increase, whereas if it was step 5, step 6, step 7, it would be more of an increase. The reason that they are clustered is two reasons. First, there was the big recession back in 2010, 2009, 2010, and then, of course, year after year of the limited amount of increases that we've received for our teachers, we've had to cluster some of those scales to help with some of that lack of dollars we were receiving. Now, our finance department has done a significant job of improving those scales, but we still have a lot of work to do, and that is another area that we're looking to phase in. If we were going to fix the scales this year, it would cost $15 million. So we're going to have to phase that in and fix that over a 3 to 5 year period. The next piece is we want to be able to attract new teachers. And we want to be able to compete with local divisions as well as Loudoun. They're within 30 miles from us. We're not going to be able to catch Loudoun, but we'll do the best we can to catch them. So we are increasing the pay from $50,000 to $52,000 for starting pay for new teachers. So that's where the 6.6% increase comes from. We've been getting a lot of questions about that, like why are we going above the 3.2 COLA? It's because we're trying to fix these two areas here, so the average is 6.6. Average. Some could be higher, some could be lower, but no one's going to be lower than that 3.2. So here is just a breakdown of the comparison of our bachelor's degree teachers from that 30-mile radius group. And as you can see, we are that blue line, we are below. Now, we do catch them as we get closer up the scale at 35 years, but we need to do a better job of compressing this scale and being able to compensate our teachers to keep teachers and attract teachers. Now, the question we always get is, well, that includes Loudoun. Loudoun does have a significant amount more money. Well, when you take Loudoun out, there still is a difference. In the early years, we are actually behind, and as we move up 10 plus years, you do see that scale compressing. But we still have some work to do when you compare us against the other 30-mile radius schools, even if you take Loudoun out. But secondly, the reason we include Loudoun is because we're losing teachers to Loudoun. That's where the majority of our teachers are going, and they're explicit when they leave. We're going to Loudoun because we're going to make more money. So we have to make Frederick County the place to be, and we have to figure that out so we keep teachers and attract teachers. Because it is a great place to be. We all know this. Here is a breakdown of the first-year teachers, starting salaries from last year to this year. And as you can see, 23 to 24, and then as you can see, we are near the bottom, tied for 6th, so we have some work to do because every other division is having the same conversations that we're having. So they might be increasing just like we're trying to increase as well. So we have to get ahead of this, and we have to make sure that we are attracting staff and keeping staff. Next is our classified. So classified are going to be our bus drivers, custodians, administrative assistants, instructional assistants. We started with the 3.2% increase there, but then we also looked at additional pay for them to get to the 6.6, because as I mentioned to you, our classified staff are an integral part of our school division. And what we're recognizing now is we're not only losing these staff to other divisions, we're losing them to local businesses. They can make more money going to Sheetz, going to Chick-fil-A, going to Target, and they're being explicit, they're telling us. So we need to do better because this is a very honorable position, because just because you're a custodian or a bus driver or a nutritional worker, you're an integral part of not only our school division, but the access for our students. The bus driver is the first face that a student sees coming to school. They work with our students in the cafeteria. Our custodians work with our students. They are an integral part of our school division, and we need to compensate them as such. And we are falling behind in this area for our classified staff. Our other professionals, we started with that 3.2 as I mentioned, and then we increased some additional staff there to help with the clusters to get to a 5% for those other professionals. And then as I mentioned, for our administrators, we stayed with that 3.2. And again, there is going to be some work that we need to do here as we look and compare ourselves to other divisions, but we had to prioritize teachers and classified staff for this budget cycle. Our principals are amazing. Our coordinators and supervisors are amazing. It's not comparing them against each other. It was prioritizing the needs of this current school year and looking at next year as well. We also wanted to take a look at some other initiatives. We wanted to be able to provide some additional incentives to keep our teachers, become more attractive. As I mentioned, we're not going to catch Loudon, but we're going to do the best we can to catch them. And we wanted to think creatively. So first is we are going to take a look at providing additional salary bumps, not stipends, but salary bumps for teachers with certain years of experience. We would like to get to 15 years, but we're going to start with 25. So this is another way that we are going to phase in some of these budget priorities. So we're starting with 25, and then we also identified some hard-to-fill positions. This isn't anything new. Some other divisions are starting to do this as well. The majority of our positions this year that are hard to fill are special education, but we also have general education teachers as well that's being hard to fill. So this is more of a sign-on bonus for those hard-to-fill positions. Again, thinking creatively, attracting staff, and keeping staff. Let me pause there. Any questions? Feedback, reactions? Yes, please. So great question. The question was, where are the substitute teachers? And I'm going to get to that. Yes, substitute teachers is separate. Yes, sir. Industry experience. Yep. Yes. So we actually don't pay the school resource officers. School security officers, and they are included in the classified, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they're included in the classified staff. Yeah, great question. Yes, ma'am. Great question. Did I repeat the question, Tara, before I answered it? The question was how we compensated our school, not school resource officers, our school security officers, which are located at the high school level. And they're included in the classified staff. So, substitutes. When we met with our principals, we got a lot of feedback in regards to the budget, but one of the areas that they continue to have concerns with is finding substitutes for classes. So we wanted to address that in many different ways. We're looking at adding what's called Premium Fridays, which is something we started. Like if you take an Uber ride from Monday to Thursday, it's $20, but on a Friday it might be $50. So we are doing that for our substitutes to hopefully attract them. And then we also added contracted subs. We added one per building to see how that goes. And then if it continues to go well, we'll add more. So those are contracted positions. And then we also increase the daily rate for our substitutes as well. There's other things that we're looking at doing there to potentially take a look at attendance bonuses for teachers so they don't call out. But we also need to remember that teachers need to call out. They have doctor's appointments. They have things going on. But we might be able to increase that by taking a look at some attendance bonuses in the future. We wanted to look at it this year, but again, these are the items that we were able to prioritize and move forward with. Did I see a hand over here? No? Okay. We also have a bus driver shortage. So we wanted to, again, they're included in the classified staff, but we also wanted to increase, they currently get an attendance bonus that's per month. So if they don't miss any, they get a bonus for that particular month, so we wanted to increase that to hopefully attract more drivers. So the other aspect of a public education budget is what's called a biennium budget. So the governor comes out with a 2-year biennium budget. So this is the first of the 2 years for this upcoming year. And there's always items that are in each of those years. So for the first year of the biennium budget, there was a 1% bonus for teachers only. And the second year of the biennium, there was a 2% pay increase for staff. If you pay attention to the General Assembly and what's happening down in Richmond, both the House and the Senate are actually talking about adding more money to public education, which would help us out significantly. So it actually might shift and adjust this pay increase, because again, this was based on the governor's original proposal, which has to be approved by the General Assembly. So this potentially can change, but where it stands right now is a 1% bonus only for staff. Meaning, you get 1% of your salary, it'll be a separate check. It can't be built into your salary because it's only a one-time bonus, because that's how it was written. But there has been talk about actually taking a look at a pay increase for staff for the first and second year of the biennium, which would be nice for all of our staff so that we can, again, compensate them as they deserve to be compensated. Questions? Yes? So the question is increasing the insurance benefits. So we take a look at those insurance benefits because we are self-insured, and we actually just re-looked at these last year. And one of the things that we look at is the premiums that staff have to pay. And part of this budget cycle is initially there was probably going to be a 10% on the employee for an increase on their premium, but we were able to work through the money. So part of the lapsed dollars that I shared with you earlier that we found, we actually put that towards the insurance so that staff did not have to pay in to that insurance. So if there are room for improvement for those insurances, yes. We actually have really good insurance when you compare us to other organizations and businesses, but if there is room for improvement, we're always willing to look into that because we have to go out for an RFP process, which is done, is it every 3 years? Every 3 years. So, and if there is specific issues or concerns from staff about our insurance, we would love to hear it, and we can take that into consideration. Because the other piece that you have to take into account when you look at insurance is you have to look at the network. And that was one of the things that we looked at with this current insurance. We don't want insurance that none of the localities here, like Valley Health and other local doctors, don't use that insurance. So that's one of the pieces that we have to take into account. And that's what we ran into when there was that big issue with Blue Cross. If they would have not gone with Valley Health, it would have put us in a bind. And that was one of the things that we were working through. But if there's something specific that you're mentioning or if you've heard, please let us know, and we would love to hear that and take it into account. Thank you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the question was, do we have strong retirement funds? And that's a great question. So in Virginia, if you are a public service employee, there's something called a VRS. And there's a percentage that the employee is responsible for paying in, and there's also a match that the employer puts into that account as well. And then once you get to, and there's different plans, it's very complicated, but once you get to a certain amount of years on one plan, you get full retirement, which is an average of your top 3 salaries. On another plan, it's a different years of experience. So it's actually a pretty healthy VRS system. And of course, there's other options like 403Bs and such that staff can actually enter into, but for what we help pay for is going to be the VRS. So the question was, do staff find that as a perk? And I read a research article the other day, and what we're seeing now is younger generations aren't thinking ahead like the older generations, so younger generations want the money now. They're like, yeah, I get retirement, but I'd much rather you take whatever you're going to give me into my VRS. I'd much rather just have that now and not think ahead. But unfortunately, that's not how the VRS works. So I would say yes, but I would also say it depends who you ask. Right? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Keep in mind, yeah, the question, we have a 22-year staff member here that said, please don't take that away. 22-year-old, excuse me, 22-year-old, and again, that was just a study that I read. There's no plans to do that. It was just answering the gentleman's question about putting it in a perspective, based on who you ask. And that is not going away. Well, I have no say in that, but right now it is not going away. Yes, Mr. Bell. So the question was, so Mr. Bell asked the individual in the front row, what's your name, by the way? Alexa. Asked Alexa because she had the question about the insurance. I will say that our insurance is actually very affordable. Now, of course, the more family members that you add to the plan, that pay is going to increase. But when you compare us against other organizations or other insurances, independent insurances, it's very affordable. Now, based on how much money you make and based how much out of pocket you might have to pay, yes, there might be some variances there, but overall, it is a very affordable insurance. And the benefits are very nice. So when you are looking into it, and if you're looking at comparisons like Mr. Bell is saying, if you're like, well, wait a minute, I'm paying this for this insurance, but you're saying I have to pay this, let us know, and that's something we can take into consideration. Absolutely, we'll do that. Yes, so we also have it's free, right? It's a free clinic that's located right across from our school board office where you can go in and see a doctor. A free clinic. So if you're not feeling well, you have the flu, you have a rash, there's something you want them to take a look at, you go in, you make an appointment, they see you, they provide you with a prescription, they're a doctor. And that was something that we added on, and it's part of the insurance as well. Yep. Yes, that's part of the insurance package. Mm-hmm. Say that again?
Makes you wonder how many other.
So it's advertised, but it sounds like we need to advertise it a little bit more, but we do advertise it. They know it's available as part of their insurance package, but there is always room for getting more information out. With 2,500 staff, I'm sure some things get missing, and let's face it, you never know you need a doctor until you need a doctor too. So absolutely we can get that information out. There was another hand up over here, and thank you, Mr. Bell, for reiterating that. Yes, ma'am. At the clinic? Okay. So something we need to look into. Thanks, guys. The question, or actually the statement was that teachers have a hard time getting in there. That's the first I'm hearing of that, but maybe that's something that we can look into and assess. Sorry to hear that. Okay. Any other comments, questions? All right. Great questions, guys, and great comments. Something else, again, to be good stewards of our dollar, something new that we started this year was we developed something called a staffing standard. Now, when we initially rolled this out, I think there was a little bit of angst and panic because it looked like we were going to be cutting a bunch of positions and going below our needs, and that wasn't the intention of these staffing standards. The intention of these staffing standards are so that we are being transparent with the positions that are in our buildings, so that we are providing our staff and our students the resources and the staff that they need, and that we are being consistent amongst our schools. Let me give you a prime example. One of them is right here in Sherando. Sherando is our largest populated high school, and they have the same number of custodians as our lowest populated high school. That doesn't make any sense. We need a staffing standard that says we need one custodian per 400 students, or that we have a local staffing standard with how we're meeting the needs of our students in the classroom, such as students with disabilities, general education students. And we need to be more objective with how we're adding those positions. So that's going to be a 3 to 5 year phase. The focus this year was getting staff in front of students. So we met with all of our principals after these standards were established to talk through looking at the standards in regards to what positions they needed, and to be good stewards of our dollar, right here, where are we below the staffing standard? So say, for example, if kindergarten was 1 to 19, and all of your classes are 1 to 15, we have some room for some movement there. That's just an example. So we met with all of our principals, and this is what they determined they needed. This is across the board, K-12. We identified positions to move around to meet the needs here so that we are only asking for an additional 25 positions. So for our general education, it's not that they're getting 5 less positions, it's they're getting 5 positions from reallocated positions and then 16 additional positions through the operating budget. This is something we're going to utilize every year. It's something that we're going to keep a close eye on in regards to standards and meeting the needs of our buildings and getting ahead of staffing our schools that's based on a standard and the needs of our students. So this is something new, but it is something that we are embracing so that we can continue to add on additional staff as per the staffing standard. Any questions on this? Please. So the example that I gave, so say if we were looking at a school that had a ratio that was below that ratio, right, it was 1 to 15, and we had a kindergarten teacher that you move that teacher and now it's 1 to 16, we're going to move that teacher somewhere else where they're above that staffing standard. And that's standard. That happens every year, but we need to make it more standard across the board because as you can see, we had positions where we were over that established standard, so we want to make sure that we're being good stewards of our dollar and good stewards of our positions. Because what we didn't want to do is go to the Board of Supervisors and say, we need 42 positions. Here you go. When we knew that we had some positions where we were over the standard. That's not okay. So for example, if a school was at 1,500 kids and they had 5 custodians, but then next year they had only 1,300 students for whatever reason, then we were able to shift those custodians to another school that might need them. So great question. The first thing that we want to do is move an FTE. So if there is a vacancy, we will move that vacancy. So a majority of these instances, we're just moving a vacancy. Now, will it have an impact on the other staff in the building because they might be getting additional students in their classroom? Potentially, and we'll work through those. And we also want to make sure that we're not moving staff that is very close to the standard. And we know that we're growing, right? So for example, if a ratio was at 1 to 18, and the ratio, when the ratio said they're 1 to 17, we're probably not going to move that staff, right? So it's going to be a significant change there. Dr. Angela, you had your hand raised there. Because next year they might get 200 more. So the question was, what if next year we reevaluate and they might need those 5 positions back? Then absolutely. Again, it's going to be based on the needs of the students and the population of that school. Yes, sir. Because of reallocation. Yep. Again, being good stewards of our dollar, showing the community as well as the Board of Supervisors we've identified internal staff and positions we had to reallocate so that we are able to meet the needs that we've identified. And that's going to happen every year. Okay? These 2 positions right here are based on compliance, so for whatever reason we don't get the dollars we want from the locality or the state, these are positions that we are non-negotiable. We have to add them on because we have to meet a state requirement in order to meet the needs of these students. So another pathway that we wanted to create for students, and one of the things that keeps me up at night is knowing that we have students that don't graduate. And it also frustrates me when we have students that don't graduate because we didn't have a specific program for them. So we have students that have specific scenarios or circumstances such as they have to work to take care of their family, or you have a new mom that's not able to go to school during the day. So we wanted to create what's called a night school, to provide students the opportunities to come in school at night after hours to access the curriculum, obtain those credits so that they can graduate and obtain those goals. So DAL-J is one of our programs, this is one of our alternative ed programs, and Mr. Thompson is doing a fantastic job up there, and we're trying to switch that mantra of what DAL-J was known as before, of that's where the bad kids go. First off, there's no such thing as a bad kid, and secondly, it's a school to provide additional alternatives and opportunities for students. So this is the tip of the iceberg. Mr. Thompson has a lot of great ideas for providing pathways and opportunities for students, so this was one of them that we wanted to slide into this budget. So here was one of the adjustments that was voted on Tuesday night, was to add some additional dollars to our safety and security budget. So we have a new safety and security supervisor that started this year. That was one of my priorities, to focus on safety and security. And he's identified a couple areas across our division that need some improvement. And in order to do that, we have to fund that. So we were allocated additional dollars here, thanks to our school board. Hopefully our Board of Supervisors approves it, to add some additional dollars for safety and security. Now, if there's emergencies or things that need to be fixed right away, we will be able to find those monies. But this is for those things that our safety and security supervisor has determined and things that he's going to be fixing and working on for this upcoming school year. Here was another area that we were able to add an additional bus thanks to our school board, is we have 6 buses in our operating budget for transportation every year. So we get 6 new buses. We've determined that in order to replace the fleet, because we travel 2.4 million miles every year, we need to get to 13 buses every year. Well, we're at 6 right now, so we're adding 3 more to that rotation. So we're getting closer to that 13. So right now we're going to be at 9 new buses every year. All right, here was a big topic, if you paid attention to any of our meetings or any of our conversations we were having, is our initial proposal was to add on additional schools through what's called the community eligibility provision. So let me break this down a little bit further, because this is very complicated, and this is in regards to feeding students breakfast and lunch during the school day. So currently, we have 9 schools that are part of this CEP provision. And what that means is it's a federal program that is determined by a percentage. And that percentage used to be 40%. And what that 40% means is students who are on free and reduced lunch and fit a specific criteria. So if you are 40% or more, you qualify for this federal program. And what this federal program means is that if your school is 40% or more, you have access to free breakfast and a free lunch, regardless if you were free and reduced or not. Now, that doesn't mean that we were making lunches for every student in that building, because that's not what was happening. During COVID, we had free breakfast and free lunch for all students because the state was providing us funding for that. And when that was happening, not every student was eating. However, before that, we were at about 40% participation, roughly. During COVID, we went up to 60% participation in breakfast and lunch. So what that tells us is there's a 20% number there of students we're missing for whatever reason who are not eating breakfast and lunch. So with those 9 schools, prior to the 9 schools, again, they were about 40%, and now on average, they're about 60%. So that is what we were budgeting for, because they changed the percentage to qualify you from 40% to 25%. As a division, we are 37%. Okay? So that changed that percentage, meaning all 21 of our schools qualifies. What it doesn't mean is that we are making 14,000 breakfasts and lunches every day. That's not what that means. Our nutritional staff and our nutritional manager does a fantastic job to determine how many students are going to eat breakfast and lunch every day. So we're not making 14,000 meals and then only 8,000 eat and we're throwing 6,000 meals away. They determine how many meals they need to make based on historical data, based on the students they know that are going to be eating, and that is what we are funding. Our nutritional fund funds the operational costs for breakfast and lunch, for paying our nutritional staff, for buying materials. That fund gets replenished with these federal reimbursement dollars, but it doesn't fund the entire budget balance. So we have to add dollars from the operating fund into that balance so that we can afford to continue to pay, because at those 9 schools, kids are no longer paying for lunch. All the lunches and breakfasts are free. So we had a lot of conversations about this. The initial proposal was to go with the 21 schools. There was a lot of questions about what that meant and those additional dollars, because it was an additional $2.2 million ask. And what we wound up doing is sticking with the 9 schools to maintain, and we're only adding $1 million into that nutritional fund. Yes, sir. Yes. Correct. Correct. Free for all students in the school. Correct. So I would encourage you to watch our school board meeting because, again, it's a needs-based budget, and then we have our school board who votes and adopts that. And generally speaking, there were some questions in regards to the dollar amount that was being presented and would that be the best use of the taxpayer dollar. That was essentially the theme of the conversation, and you can watch the school board meeting to see that. So there was a lot of conversations about that, and you could see the different, and as well as the Board of Supervisors also had some opinions on that as well. I think this is something that we could continue to work on and continue to have conversations. We're maintaining the 9 schools, and this is something that my staff and I believe that we need to continue to work on and have conversations with so that people can fully understand what this looks like. Please. Right. Bless you. So 2 things with this. When we initially rolled this out, one of the things that I wanted to be very clear on with the public, with both of our boards, is that if we don't move forward with this, nobody's saying we're not feeding kids. Nobody is, including our school board, Board of Supervisors, whoever. Even if you disagree with this, everybody wants to feed kids, and nobody said that. It was how we were funding feeding those kids, because there is a debt that we accrue every year for students that don't feed. We don't want to shame kids. If you didn't bring your lunch for that day or can't afford a lunch, we don't say, oh, you get a cheese sandwich and everyone else gets a hot meal. That does not happen. We know that you don't have a meal. We are able to provide them with that meal, and they eat for free. But there is a debt that accrues. That debt does not equate to the $1.3 million, but the points that my team and I were trying to make is that it's the 20% of the students that we are missing. That is where we are concerned about, and we have other efforts that we have to make in order to meet those kids, and that's essentially what happened there. Now, are there additional reimbursement dollars that we would have received? Sure, but would there have been additional costs that we would have to put into feeding all those students for free? Yes, and that's why there was an additional dollar amount there that goes directly into that nutritional fund. So, but I encourage you to go watch the board meetings. Because again, it's a needs-based budget, and then we have further conversations with both the boards in regards to how it gets adopted and approved, and that's what we move forward with. And like I said, we have the 9 schools that qualify, and we just need to have additional conversations to hopefully move forward in the future with the other schools. So yes, Mr. Bell. Yes, yeah. And if you have any other questions, please reach out. More than happy to. There has been conversations not only in Virginia but across the nation to push for this, because it's not just about feeding, it's about the right proportions, a nutritional meal, 4-course meal, vegetables, fruits, the right number of carbs, the proportions, so that we are feeding our children with healthy meals so they're able to access their education. And it's a way to teach them those things. So it's more than just feeding students that can't eat. Great question. So where we landed, we initially landed at 7.9 million for additional dollars from the county. I'm going to break this down more in a second, but now we're at the 7 million because we reduced the ask for the CEP for all schools, and we added the 2 additional items for the 1 bus and additional dollars for safety and security. So as I mentioned to you earlier, we have 4 revenue streams, 2 of them being the largest, which is the state and the local. So the state, as you can see, we did receive some additional dollars there, so that's why they were in the positive. Hopefully we'll get some more. There's a lot of talk at the General Assembly, as I mentioned. Federal, don't panic about that. That's just COVID dollars that are going away, and those are just rolling reimbursement dollars that we are not anticipating for this upcoming year. We have 35,000 less in fees. That varies year to year. That's like, for example, if we rent Sharando out to a wrestling club and we get money for that, it gets added, or if there's an insurance claim. So that's why that number's not very large. And then the 4th line there is the locality. And as you can see, we're asking for an additional $7 million. The other aspect, or the other fund, is debt service. So we had 2 big projects recently, Indian Hollow and James Wood High, that we are now moving on the next phase of that project. So now we are asking for an additional $2.35 million from the locality to pay off that debt. And as you can see, it will mature after that because that will be the last phase of that project. And there's other projects built into here as well, but that's why it's increasing, because of the Indian Hollow and James Wood High School. Yes? Add another bathroom at James Wood High bathroom. Where's Mr. Goodwin at? I can put that on his plate. Not familiar with that, but I can ask Mr. Goodwin to see if that was part of the conversation. It probably is too late, yes, but if there's other issues that we need to be made aware of, we can talk about that. Okay, sounds good. All right. The next fund that we're going to talk about is our capital asset projects, and those are our current assets. Now, we appreciate the Board of Supervisors giving us some additional dollars to state revenue that we received last year to chisel away at some of these projects. But as you can see over here, there's some projects that have a year next to it because we were not given funding in previous years to take care of these projects. So this dollar amount is increasing because we have not been given funding to address these issues. And this is a very complex process that we review all of our assets. As you can see, some of the items on here, we have lighting, we have playgrounds, we have HVAC, we have boilers. So we take a look at all those items because they're on a replacement schedule, or something breaks and we need to fix. We're going to prioritize these items so that we can hopefully chisel away at that $19 million. And the more that we don't address it, the more that that dollar amount goes up. Let's talk about time. Yes, Libby. No, please. Yes, sir. Clark and Winchester, yes. Frederick County. So the question is about NREP and the makeup of that regional program. Just getting the online user. Go ahead. Great question, great question. So the building is actually ours. So these capital projects would be our responsibility. Where their dollars kick in is the students that participate in the program. So yes, it's in Frederick County, and yes, it's regional, but it's a regional program that they send their students to. Yeah, it's understand. Yeah, but it's still, I get it, but it's still, but to that point, that apartment is not yours if you're renting it. It would be the responsibility of the owner, though. Right. True, but we have a good relationship with them, right? So it's not like we're trying to kick them out. But it is at the bottom line, it's our building, so we're responsible for it, yeah. I like where you're going, I like that thought, but it's our building. we're responsible for us, right? Great question, Lovey. I agree. All right, so lastly, and then of course, any other questions, just want to talk about timeline. I presented the budget back in January, needs-based budget. We've had finance committee meetings, budget work sessions. We've had a lot of conversations. And then our school board adopted the budget on February 20th. That was this past Tuesday. Wednesday, I then presented the school board's adopted budget on Wednesday to the Board of Supervisors. Really good conversation. They are then going to work through that and incorporate that into all of the requests. We are not the only one that accesses those local dollars. So they incorporate that into the bigger picture. There'll be conversations in March about tax rate, revenues, all that. So I encourage you to pay attention to that. And then April 10th is the tentative date that they will be approving the budget, which will include our budget as well. After that is approved, tentatively, we're going to meet as a work session group on April 11th with just our school board to talk about that allocation of dollars, what that looks like, if anything changed or adjusted, and then they will then approve the budget on April 16th. So they adopt in February, approve in April. And then we move forward, and then we start talking about FY26 in August, right, Patty? We do have one more town hall at Millbrook, so if this live stream went well, I do want to give a big shout out to our media team. Thank you all so much. I know this is a lot of work, and I appreciate this. I know everyone likes to throw things at me with my amazing, crazy ideas, but this really means a lot. So we're going to assess to see how many people are online, and if it went very well, we're going to continue that into Millbrook. So our next session's at Millbrook, so please feel to participate. And just a big thank you. And again, I apologize for being late. Time is very valuable, but your feedback and input is very, very important to me. It's important to us. It's important to our school board. And I'm going to stick around, so if you have any other questions or comments or reactions, I'm all ears. All right. Well, thank you. Have a great evening. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to our principals. And thank you to Sharando, too, for using your auditorium. Got to my team, our Sharando team up there. And thank you to my team as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.